My name is Emily Davis, and I'm 21 years old. After graduating from culinary school, I started working at the coffee shop that my parents own and run. It's a cozy, well-loved spot in our town, with many regulars who make every day special. I have deep admiration for my parents, who have been running the shop for years. Balancing work and studies was tougher than I anticipated, but I found fulfillment in my daily routine. Then one day, everything changed with an unexpected call from Bob. My wife had an accident. Bob's voice was unusually tense, though we didn't know the details. My parents and I were immediately concerned for my sister-in-law. Bob asked if we could look after his kids while he stayed at the hospital, and we readily agreed. His children are still quite young and need a lot of care. Bob brought the kids to the coffee shop before heading to the hospital. They seemed confused and a bit scared, but I welcomed them warmly, trying to make them feel at ease. 2 hours later, Bob called again. Thankfully, my sister-in-law wasn't in any life-threatening danger, but she had severely sprained her foot and would need to rest at home for a while. Bob asked if we could continue caring for the kids during this time. I felt conflicted. My parents and I had the coffee shop to run, and I was also working there, so it seemed impossible to manage both. After discussing it with my parents, we decided I would take care of my nieces and nephew for about 2 weeks. At first, I was anxious about whether I could manage looking after them properly, but they quickly warmed up to me, and they were well behaved, making the experience much easier than I had feared. When things got tough, my mother was always there to lend a hand. 2 weeks later, things settled down, and life at the coffee shop returned to normal. But then Bob called again. My wife still isn't feeling well, he said. Could you help with the kids when she needs a break? I wasn't sure what to do, but in the end, I couldn't ignore my nieces and nephew, so I agreed to help out occasionally. Sure enough, a few days later, my sister-in-law texted, "Could you watch the kids tomorrow?" I replied, "Okay." The next day, I picked up my nephews in the morning, dropped them off at kindergarten, and then brought them back home in the afternoon to care for them. My mother stopped by a few times to check in. After dinner and baths, we waited for Bob to pick them up. When he arrived, I handed him the dinner my mother had prepared for him and his wife. As Bob took the children and headed home, he sighed in relief. "That's a lifesaver," he said gratefully. Despite my exhaustion from these unfamiliar responsibilities, I couldn't shake the feeling that all this effort might not be entirely necessary. But leaving Bob's family to manage on their own wasn't an option, so my mother and I continued to help as best we could. A few days later, another message arrived from my sister-in-law. "Could you help out with the kids again?" Like before, I picked up the children in the morning and took them to kindergarten. This time, the teachers recognized me, making the drop-off much smoother. The boys cheerfully waved goodbye, saying, "See you, Emily," and happily went off to their classes without a fuss. Afterward, I headed to the cafe to help my parents, but soon enough, it was time to pick up the kids again. My father noticed the time and reminded me, so I quickly left the cafe. When I arrived at the kindergarten, there were already a few parents waiting to collect their children. As I stood there, someone called my name from behind. "Emily." I turned around, surprised to see a familiar face from school. "Ashley." It was an unexpected reunion. "Long time no see," she said, smiling. Ashley explained that her child also attended the same kindergarten as my nephews. Though I wanted to catch up, it wasn't the best moment to chat, so we exchanged contact information and promised to reconnect later. The next day, Ashley visited the cafe during my shift. My parents, noticing the situation, suggested we take a break and chat once things slowed down. Grateful for the opportunity, I took their advice and sat down with Ashley. To my delight, Ashley had really taken a liking to our cafe. But as we talked, her expression suddenly grew serious, as if she had remembered something important. "By the way, I saw your nephew's mom the other day," she said, her tone shifting. I blinked in surprise at the unexpected comment and nodded. "Really?" "Yeah, I didn't talk to her, but I've met her before, so I'm sure it was her. But there's something." Ashley hesitated, struggling to find the right words, which only heightened my curiosity. I urged her to continue, and when she did, her words left me stunned. I noticed my mom, who had overheard our conversation, glance over at us, and our eyes met, both filled with concern. After Ashley left, I turned to my mom, trying to process what had just been discussed. "What do you think?" I asked. She paused before replying, "Let's keep an eye on the situation for a little while longer." I nodded in agreement, but then, one day, I received a sudden call from Bob. I missed it at first, and when I saw multiple missed calls from him, I quickly dialed him back, feeling a knot of unease in my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked, confused by his urgency. "What happened?" Bob's voice was tight, barely containing his anger. He explained that he had gone home to retrieve something he'd forgotten, only to find the kids home alone in what should have been an empty house. His story left me in shock, but as my mind raced, a troubling thought surfaced. Why was I the one being blamed? My confusion seemed to fuel Bob's anger even more. "My wife said she asked you to watch the kids today, but you left them alone, and now you're questioning me." I was stunned by his accusation, but there were too many things that didn't add up, so I defended myself. "Yes, your wife did message me, but I told her I couldn't do it today. Mom got sick last night, and we're short-staffed at the cafe. I have to work and don't have the time to watch the kids." There was a pause as Bob absorbed what I said. Then, his voice softened, but there was a hint of suspicion. "My wife also said that every time she asked you to look after the kids, you complained and demanded payment. Is that true?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing and couldn't help but raise my voice. "What? I've never said anything like that. I've never asked for money. I've spent on the kids myself, and Mom knows that too. If you don't believe me, why don't you ask her?" Bob fell silent, clearly unsettled by my response. He muttered, almost to himself, "So what was that story about the money my wife mentioned?" "I have no idea," I replied firmly. "You should ask your wife about it." Bob's voice sounded weary as he responded, "I'll do that." Although I hesitated, I couldn't keep quiet after everything that had been said, so I decided to share with Bob what Ashley had told me. After listening, he sighed heavily, his voice reflecting deep exhaustion. "Give me some time to think," he said before hanging up. As the anger subsided, I started to worry about Bob and decided to tell Mom everything I had shared with him. Days passed without any word from Bob, and during that time, my parents and I grew increasingly concerned. A few days later, another message arrived from Bob's wife. As usual, she was asking me to take care of the kids. My first instinct was to refuse. I had been helping out of goodwill, but knowing she had spoken about me behind my back made me feel taken advantage of. Just as I was about to decline, my mom intervened. "Reach out to Bob before you respond," she advised. Taking her suggestion, I forwarded the message to Bob. A few minutes later, his reply came through. He seemed conflicted but had clearly made up his mind after seeing my message. After considering Bob's feelings, I responded to his wife with a simple, "Okay," and went to pick up the kids as usual. Once I had dropped the kids off at kindergarten, I made an important phone call. As I hung up, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. When I arrived at the coffee shop, everything was set. Bob was already there, looking tense, whether from nerves or something else, I couldn't tell. It was the first time I'd seen him like this, and I hesitated, unsure how to approach him, but Mom stepped in. "I'll pick up the kids, so don't worry," she told him gently. "You need to focus on sorting things out with your wife. Emily, I'm counting on you." Bob, startled by my mom's words, nodded. I nodded back at her as well. "All right, I'm heading out." With that, Bob and I set off for his house. When we arrived, he paused at the door, fumbling with his keys. I noticed his hands were shaking but chose to look away, giving him space. As he unlocked the door, faint voices drifted out. My sister-in-law and a few other women were talking inside. Bob slowly pushed the door open, and we entered quietly, trying not to make a sound. The conversation became clearer. "So, how's your foot doing?" I heard one of the women ask. My sister-in-law's voice responded to the question. "Oh, it's fine, almost completely healed." My suspicions were confirmed in that moment. The uneasy feeling I'd had recently was suddenly clear. I snapped back to attention, focusing on what my sister-in-law was saying. "But once it's fully healed, my husband will probably figure it out, and I won't be able to lounge around like I can now." One of her friends chimed in. "Oh right, your sister-in-law and her parents are looking after the kids, aren't they? How lucky." "Yeah, really lucky that Emily isn't married. I'm so grateful to have an unemployed, single homebody living at home," my sister-in-law replied with a chuckle. As I listened, my body grew hot with anger. I had suspected that my sister-in-law might be taking advantage of us, but hearing her blatant disrespect was infuriating. I couldn't hold back any longer. I burst into the living room, throwing the door open with a force that startled everyone inside. My sister-in-law's eyes widened in shock as she saw me standing there. I glared at her, my voice trembling with anger. "Yes, I'm not married, and I live at home, but I'm far from idle. We helped out because we thought you needed it. I never imagined you would talk about us like this." Instead of addressing what I had said, my sister-in-law's focus shifted to how I had gotten into the house. "Why are you here? How did you get in?" At that moment, I felt a tap on my shoulder and stepped back. Bob moved forward, his face a mix of anger and disappointment. When my sister-in-law finally noticed him, her eyes widened in fear. Bob's voice was icy as he spoke. "I let us in. You've been lying to me all this time. You're despicable. You've been using the money I gave you for yourself instead of passing it to Emily, haven't you?" My sister-in-law turned pale, her bravado gone. I turned to her friends, gesturing for them to leave. They quickly gathered their things and left, wearing awkward expressions. Among them was one person who caught my eye as she walked out, Senior Ashley. Ashley had known my sister-in-law for a while, but she had grown concerned about her recent behavior. When we unexpectedly reconnected, Ashley offered her support, helping to bring the truth to light. After everyone had left, my sister-in-law began to speak through her tears. Her story, in short, was that since the birth of their second child, managing the household and caring for the kids had become overwhelming. With Bob constantly busy with work, she felt unsupported with both childcare and housework. When she got injured, my mother and I stepped in to help, which made things more manageable for her, leading to her reliance on us. As for the money Bob had given her, she admitted she had been without any disposable income since getting married and had used the money out of necessity. I wasn't entirely convinced by her explanations. Sensing my skepticism, Bob suggested it was time to leave. Taking his advice, I headed out of Bob's house. Upon arriving home, my mother met me with a worried expression. Dad was looking after my nephews, so I seized the opportunity to explain the situation to her. Her face reflected concern and resignation as she said, "I see, it's a problem between them now." She then went back to check on the kids, and I followed her. My nephews, unaware of the turmoil, greeted me with bright smiles, calling out, "Aunt Emily." Despite my internal struggle, I managed to smile and respond to them. Several hours later, Bob returned home and announced he would be staying at our parents' house for the night. My mother, understanding Bob's need for space, simply replied, "I see." After tucking the kids in, Bob shared his decision with our parents and me. "I won't be divorcing her this time, but if things don't change, I'll reconsider. Emily, I'm sorry for everything you've gone through. And you too, Mom." I voiced my concerns. "Are you sure about this, Bob?" His nod was firm as he replied, "Yes. After talking with my wife, I realize I have some responsibility in this too. We've decided to give our marriage another chance." I asked Bob to elaborate, and he said, "I've been so focused on work that I haven't paid enough attention to my wife or our kids. I understand now that this may have put undue pressure on her and been unfair to the children. I should have been more present." Listening to Bob, I felt a mix of emotions. Mom then spoke, "I understand that, as an individual, it's hard to forgive what your wife has done to us, but as a wife and mother, I get where she might be coming from. If this is the decision you both have made, I won't oppose it, but make sure you handle your issues privately from now on." Bob nodded, clearly moved by Mom's words, and bit his lip, reflecting on the gravity of the situation. Since that incident, neither Bob nor my sister-in-law has reached out to me, and I haven't seen her at all. It's likely too awkward for her to face me after everything that happened. My father is upset that she hasn't even offered an apology, but honestly, I'm relieved to avoid any encounters that might stir up unpleasant memories. When I shared this with Bob, he reassured me, "I understand. I'll do my best to keep you from running into her." Thanks to that, my daily routine returned to normal. The sound of the bell caught my attention, and I turned to see Bob standing at the entrance with my nephews by his side. As soon as Bob let go of their hands, the kids dashed towards me, calling out my name. "Aunt Emily." I greeted them with a warm smile. As the children chatted with my parents and enjoyed some cake, Bob quietly confided in me that while my sister-in-law was feeling remorseful, she wasn't happy about the kids visiting me since they were so fond of me. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel that she had only herself to blame for the situation. Although I might have to face her again eventually, it doesn't seem likely that I'll forget what she did anytime soon.